The elevator doors slid open with a soft ding, and Robert stepped into the empty hallway of his office building. It was nearly midnight, and the place felt different at this hour. Quieter, almost eerie. The polished marble floors reflected the dim security lights, and his footsteps echoed as he walked toward his office on the 20th floor. He hadn't planned to come back tonight. The charity event had run late, and he was exhausted from shaking hands and making small talk with donors. But halfway home, he remembered the folder sitting on his desk, the one with the contracts that needed his signature by morning. The one he absolutely couldn't forget. Robert loosened his tie as he walked down the corridor. At 45, he'd built an empire from nothing. His tech company had made him wealthy beyond imagination, but lately that success felt hollow. His wife had passed away 7 years ago, leaving him to raise their 2 teenagers alone. Between board meetings and business trips, he barely saw his kids anymore. They ate dinner in silence most nights, each lost in their own world. He was about to turn the corner when he heard it. A sound so soft he almost missed it. Crying. Someone was crying. Robert stopped, his hand frozen on the doorknob of his office. He listened carefully. The sound was coming from the executive bathroom just down the hall. His first instinct was to ignore it and mind his own business. But something in the sound, something raw and desperate, made him pause. He walked slowly toward the bathroom and knocked gently on the door. The crying stopped immediately. "Hello? Is everything all right in there?" Silence. Robert knocked again, softer this time. "I'm not security. I just want to make sure you're okay." More silence. Then a shaky voice. "I'm fine. Please just go away." But Robert didn't go away. Maybe it was because he remembered his own darkest nights, sitting alone after his wife died, when he wished someone had checked on him. Maybe it was something else. He pushed the door open slowly. Sitting on the floor near the sink was a young woman in a blue cleaning uniform. Her name tag said Rosa. She was heavily pregnant, her belly round and prominent beneath the loose fabric of her uniform. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, and she looked up at him with a mixture of fear and embarrassment. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, trying to stand up. "I'll get back to work. I was just taking a break. I'm sorry." "No, please don't get up," Robert said, holding up his hand. He could see she was struggling just to move. "Are you hurt? Do you need medical help?" Rosa shook her head, but fresh tears started rolling down her cheeks. She looked away, ashamed. Robert had never been good with emotions. After his wife died, he'd learned to bury his feelings deep and focus on work. But something about this moment felt important. He couldn't just walk away. He grabbed a box of tissues from the counter and handed it to her, then sat down on the floor a respectful distance away. His expensive suit would probably be ruined, but he didn't care. "I'm Robert," he said gently. "What's going on?" Rosa wiped her eyes with a tissue. "You're Mr. Wellington. You own this building." "I do, but right now, I'm just someone who's concerned. Talk to me." For a long moment, Rosa said nothing. Then, as if a dam had broken, the words came flooding out. "I lost my apartment 3 days ago," she whispered. "My landlord, he's an old man, and he needed to sell the building. He gave me notice, but I couldn't find another place in time. Everything's so expensive now, and I'm pregnant with twins, so nobody wants to rent to me. They think I won't be able to pay." Robert listened, his chest tightening. "I've been sleeping here," Rosa continued, her voice breaking. "In the supply closet on the 15th floor. I bring a blanket and leave before anyone comes in the morning. I know it's wrong. I know I could get fired if anyone finds out, but I have nowhere else to go." The words hung in the air between them. Robert felt like he'd been punched in the gut. This woman, pregnant with twins, had been living in his building for 3 days, and nobody knew. Nobody cared. "What about the father?" Robert asked carefully. "Can he help?" Rosa's face crumpled. "Daniel died 4 months ago. Construction accident. One minute we were planning our wedding and picking names for the babies. The next minute he was gone." Robert closed his eyes. He knew that pain. The sudden, brutal loss of the person you loved most. The way the world kept spinning while yours fell apart. I was in nursing school, Rosa continued. I was so close to finishing. Just a few more weeks. But when Daniel died, there were funeral costs and medical bills, and I had to take time off work. I fell behind on everything. I dropped out of school, lost my apartment, and now I'm here, cleaning toilets at midnight, trying to hold on until these babies come. She placed a hand on her swollen belly, and Robert saw the way she touched it. Protective. Loving. Despite everything she was going through, she still had hope for those babies. How far along are you? Robert asked. 7 months. The babies are healthy, thank God. But I'm terrified. What happens when they come? I can't take care of twins with no home, no money, no degree. What kind of life will they have? Robert thought about his own children, asleep in their comfortable beds at home. They'd never known hunger or fear. They'd never slept on a closet floor. They took their privilege for granted, just like he had for so long. Why haven't you asked for help? Robert said. There are programs, shelters. I've tried, Rosa interrupted. The shelters are full. The programs have waiting lists that are months long, and I'm too proud to beg. I've worked since I was 15 years old. I've never asked anyone for anything. But now, her voice trailed off. Now she was out of options, out of pride, out of everything except the will to keep going for those babies. Robert stood up slowly, his mind racing. He extended his hand to help Rosa up, and she took it, struggling to her feet. She was tiny, barely reaching his shoulder, but her belly made her look fragile and strong at the same time. Thank you for listening, Rosa said quietly. Please don't tell anyone about the closet. I promise I'll find something else soon. I just need a few more days. Robert looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the determination in her jaw, the fear she was trying so hard to hide. And he made a decision right there, standing in that bathroom at midnight, that would change both their lives forever. Rosa, he said firmly, you're not sleeping in a closet tonight, or any night. We're going to figure this out. Rosa stared at him, confused. What do you mean? I mean, I'm going to help you. But why? Rosa asked, her voice breaking. You don't know me. Why would you help me? Robert thought about his wife, about the night she died giving birth to their youngest son. He thought about how alone he'd felt, how the world had seemed so dark. And he thought about how much he wished someone had been there to help him through it. Because I can, Robert said simply. And because you remind me that there are still people in this world worth fighting for. Rosa broke down crying again. But this time, they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of relief, of hope, of something she hadn't felt in months. The feeling that maybe, just maybe, everything would be okay. Robert didn't know exactly what he was going to do yet, but as he helped Rosa gather her cleaning supplies and walked her toward the elevator, he knew one thing for certain. This young woman, this stranger crying in his bathroom, had just reminded him of something he'd forgotten. That wealth without compassion was worthless, that success without humanity was empty, and that sometimes the most important thing a person could do was simply show up and care. As the elevator doors closed and they rode down together in silence, Robert felt something shift inside him. For the first time in years, he felt alive. He felt purposeful. He felt like maybe his life meant something more than just board meetings and profit margins. And Rosa, standing beside him with one hand on her belly and hope flickering in her tired eyes, felt something too. She felt like maybe, against all odds, her babies would have a chance at the life she'd always dreamed of giving them. Neither of them knew what would come next, but in that moment, in that elevator, two strangers connected by circumstance and compassion began a journey that would transform them both in ways they never could have imagined. Robert couldn't sleep that night. After dropping Rosa off at a hotel and paying for a week's stay, he'd gone home to his empty mansion and sat in his study until dawn thinking. His mind kept returning to that bathroom, to Rosa's tears. to the way she'd tried so hard to maintain her dignity, even while sitting on a cold floor with nowhere to go. When morning came, he skipped his usual breakfast meeting and drove straight to his office. His assistant, Patricia, looked surprised to see him so early. She was even more surprised when he asked her to pull Rosa's employment file. "The night cleaner?" Patricia asked, raising an eyebrow. "Is there a problem?" "No problem," Robert said. "Just pull the file, please." Alone in his office, Robert read through Rosa's records. She'd been working for his company for 2 years. Never missed a shift. Never had a single complaint. Her supervisor's notes were filled with praise. Arrives early. Works hard. Takes pride in her job. The file showed she'd even reported a water leak that could have caused thousands in damage. She'd saved the company money and probably nobody had even thanked her. Robert picked up the phone and called his building manager. Tom, I need you to tell me everything you know about Rosa Martinez." There was a pause on the other end. "The pregnant cleaner?" "Not much to tell. She keeps to herself. Does good work. Why?" "Just tell me what you know." Tom sighed. "Well, she's always professional. Sometimes I see her studying during her breaks, medical textbooks or something. She used to chat with some of the other cleaners, but lately she's been quiet. Honestly, Mr. Wellington, I barely notice her. She's just there doing her job." That was the problem, Robert thought after hanging up. Rosa was invisible. She cleaned his building every night, making sure everything was perfect for people like him, and nobody even noticed her. She was struggling, drowning, and the world just kept walking past. Over the next few days, Robert did something he'd never done before. He investigated not for business purposes, but because he genuinely cared. He talked to other employees who worked late. He reviewed security footage and saw Rosa arriving 2 hours early for every shift, sitting in the break room with her textbooks spread out, studying. He learned that she'd been in nursing school, just weeks away from completing her certification. He learned about Daniel, her fiancé who died on a construction site when a crane malfunctioned. He learned that Rosa had come to this country 5 years ago with nothing but a dream and a backpack, putting herself through school while working 3 jobs. The more Robert learned, the more impressed he became. Rosa wasn't looking for handouts or shortcuts. She was a fighter. She'd been knocked down by life repeatedly, but she kept getting back up. Until now. Until the weight of it all became too much. Robert found himself thinking about his own story. He'd started his tech company in a garage 20 years ago. Everyone said he'd fail, but he'd believed in himself. He'd worked 18-hour days, sacrificed everything, and eventually succeeded beyond his wildest dreams. But he'd had advantages Rosa didn't have. He'd had a supportive family. He'd had opportunities. He'd never been truly alone. On the 4th day, Robert made a decision. He called Rosa and asked her to come to his office. He could hear the fear in her voice when she agreed. Rosa arrived that afternoon wearing clean clothes but looking exhausted. Her hands shook slightly as she sat down across from his massive desk. Robert could see she thought she was being fired. "Rosa, I want to talk to you about your situation," Robert began. "Please," Rosa interrupted, her voice tight. "Please don't fire me. I know I shouldn't have been sleeping in the building. It was wrong, but I promise I'll find another place. I won't do it again." "I'm not firing you," Robert said gently. "I want to help you." Rosa looked confused. "Help me how?" Robert leaned forward. "I own several properties around the city. One of them is a guest house on my estate. It's small, but it's furnished and comfortable. Nobody's using it right now. I want you to stay there, no rent, just until you get back on your feet." Rosa's mouth dropped open. I can't accept that. That's too much. It's not too much. The house is just sitting empty. And there's more." Robert pulled out a folder. "You were in nursing school, correct?" Rosa nodded, tears already forming in her eyes. "I've contacted your program. You can re-enroll for the next session starting in 2 months. That gives you time to have your babies and recover. I'll cover the tuition and any other costs." "Why?" Rosa whispered. "Why would you do this for me?" "What do you want?" It was a fair question. Robert had spent enough time in the business world to know that nothing came free. There was always an angle, always a catch. "I don't want anything," Robert said. 5 years ago, my wife died giving birth to our youngest son. For months after that, I was lost. I had money, but I felt completely alone. Nobody checked on me. Nobody asked if I was okay. Everyone just assumed that because I was wealthy, I was fine. But I wasn't fine." He paused, the memory still painful. A few times I thought about giving up, but I had my kids to think about. They needed me, and slowly I found my way back. But I never forgot how dark those days were. When I saw you in that bathroom, I saw myself, and I realized something. I have all this money, all this power, and what good is it if I can't help someone who needs it? Rosa was crying now, tears streaming down her face. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Robert replied. Let me help you. Not because you owe me anything, but because it's the right thing to do. Because you deserve a chance. Because those babies deserve a chance. Rosa covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. Robert waited patiently, letting her process everything. Finally, she looked up at him with red, swollen eyes. Yes, she whispered. Thank you. Thank you so much. That evening, Robert drove Rosa to his estate. The main house sat on 5 acres of land in an exclusive neighborhood. The guest house was separated from the main house by a garden and a small pond. It had 1 bedroom, a kitchen, a bathroom, and a cozy living room with a fireplace. Rosa stood in the doorway looking overwhelmed. This is beautiful, she said quietly. Make yourself at home, Robert told her. There's food in the kitchen, towels in the bathroom. If you need anything, just call me. As he turned to leave, Rosa called out to him, Mr. Wellington, can I ask you something? Of course. And please call me Robert. Your kids, Rosa said hesitantly. Are they okay with this? With me being here? Robert smiled. I haven't told them yet, but they'll understand. They're good kids, a little spoiled maybe, but good. That night at dinner, Robert told his children about Rosa. His daughter Sophie, 16 years old, looked skeptical. So you just invited some random woman to live in our guest house? Sophie asked. Dad, that's weird. She's not random, Robert explained. She works for our company. She's pregnant and homeless. It's temporary just until she can get on her feet. His son, James, 14, seemed more interested. Is she really sleeping in our building? That's crazy. It is crazy, Robert agreed. And it's wrong. We have so much and she has nothing. I thought maybe we could share. Sophie rolled her eyes. Since when do you care about sharing? You're always working. You barely notice us, let alone some cleaning lady. The words stung because they were true. Robert had been absent, buried in work, using it as an escape from his grief and loneliness. You're right, he admitted. I haven't been present. But maybe this is my wake-up call. Maybe helping Rosa will help us too. The next few days were awkward. Rosa tried to stay invisible, avoiding the main house and keeping to herself. But Sophie's curiosity got the better of her. One afternoon, she knocked on the guest house door. Rosa answered, looking nervous. Hi, you must be Sophie? Yeah, Sophie said, studying her. Can I come in? They sat in the small living room, and Sophie asked direct questions that only a teenager could get away with. What happened to your boyfriend? How did you end up homeless? Aren't you scared to have twins? Rosa answered honestly, and slowly Sophie's skepticism melted away. By the end of the conversation, Sophie was crying and hugging Rosa. I'm sorry I was mean about you staying here, Sophie said. My mom died when I was 9. I guess I was jealous that my dad was paying attention to you instead of us. Rosa hugged her back. Your dad loves you so much. He talks about you and your brother all the time. He's just been hurting like we all hurt sometimes. James was easier to win over. He was fascinated by Rosa's stories about nursing school and asked a million questions about the human body. Rosa patiently answered each one, even drawing diagrams to explain complex concepts. Over the following weeks, something unexpected happened. The Wellington family started coming together in a way they hadn't since their mother died. They began having dinner together, with Rosa joining them several times a week. She'd share stories about her life, about Daniel, about her dreams for her babies. Robert found himself laughing again, really laughing. Not the polite chuckles he gave at business meetings. Sophie started opening up about school and her fears about growing up. James showed them his science projects and talked about wanting to be a doctor someday. Rosa was nervous about accepting so much help, but she threw herself into preparing for her nursing exam. Robert hired a tutor to help her catch up on the material she'd missed. Every evening, she studied at the guest house while her babies kicked and moved inside her. But not everyone was happy about the Guria. Robert spent the entire morning making calls. He tried Rosa's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. He called the building manager, the night shift supervisor, anyone who might know where she'd gone. Nothing. Rosa had vanished as quietly as she'd appeared. Sophie and James were equally frantic. Over the past few weeks, Rosa had become more than just a guest to them. She'd become something like family. Sophie had confided in Rosa about her fears and insecurities in ways she never could with her father. James had found a patient teacher who actually listened to his endless questions. Maybe she went back to the shelter. James suggested during lunch. Robert had already checked. He'd called every shelter in the city. None of them had a Rosa Martinez registered. Most were full anyway, turning away desperate people every day. She could be anywhere, Sophie said, her voice breaking. Dad, what if something happens to her? What if she goes into labor and there's nobody to help her? The thought made Robert's stomach turn. He'd been useless when his wife went into labor with James. He'd panicked, paced the hospital hallways, felt completely helpless. At least he'd had doctors and nurses and a safe place. Rosa had nothing. That afternoon, Robert did something he hadn't done in years. He canceled all his meetings and went driving through the city looking for Rosa. He checked bus stations, parks, anywhere a desperate person might seek shelter. Sophie and James came with him, their faces pressed against the car windows, searching. They drove through neighborhoods Robert barely knew existed, places where laundromats doubled as warming centers, where people lined up outside churches for free meals, where the gap between his world and Rosa's world became painfully clear. I had no idea, Sophie whispered as they passed a line of people waiting for food at a community kitchen. I knew homeless people existed, but I never really saw them. Not like this. Robert understood what she meant. It was easy to ignore suffering when you lived in a mansion and drove a luxury car. Poverty stayed hidden in shadows, in alleys, in places people like him never had to visit. By evening, they hadn't found Rosa. Robert sat in his study, staring at his phone, willing it to ring. He thought about calling the police, but what would he say? An adult woman left his property voluntarily. She hadn't committed a crime. She had every right to leave, but that didn't make it right. That didn't ease the guilt gnawing at his chest. This is my fault, Robert said to Sophie, who sat curled up in a chair across from him. I should have anticipated this. Should have known Richard would cause trouble. Should have protected her better. You tried to help her, Sophie said. That's more than most people would do, is it? Or was Richard right? Was I being selfish, helping Rosa to make myself feel better? To feel like I was doing something good while my real life fell apart? Sophie stood up and walked over to her father. She hadn't hugged him in months, but now she wrapped her arms around him tightly. You're a good dad, she whispered. I've been angry at you for being gone all the time, for choosing work over us. But helping Rosa? That wasn't selfish. That was the most unselfish thing I've ever seen you do. And it changed us. Changed all of us. Robert held his daughter, fighting back tears. She was right. Helping Rosa had changed them. For weeks, their house had felt like a home again. They'd laughed at dinner. They'd talked about things that mattered. They'd been a family. The next morning, James had an idea. Her phone goes to voicemail, right? What if we leave messages, long ones? So even if she doesn't call back, she knows we're looking for her. It seemed futile, but they tried anyway. Sophie called first. Rosa, it's Sophie. Please come back. I don't care what anyone says. You belong here with us. You made our house feel like home again. You listened to me when nobody else would. Please let us help you. Please be safe, James went next. Hi, Rosa, it's James. I've been researching twin pregnancies because I want to be ready when you come back. Did you know that twins can be born at different times? Sometimes days apart. That's so cool. Anyway, please call us. We're really worried. Finally, Robert called. Rosa, it's Robert. I understand why you left, but you're wrong. You're not ruining my reputation. You're not causing problems. You reminded me what matters in life. You reminded me how to be human again. My kids need you. I need you. Please let us know you're okay. They left messages every few hours, filling her voicemail with their voices, their worries, their hopes that she'd return. Meanwhile, Robert dealt with the fallout at work. Richard had been busy spreading his concerns to the board of directors. Robert was called into an emergency meeting. 7 board members sat around the conference table, their faces serious. The chairman, an older man named Harold, spoke first. Robert, we need to discuss this situation with the employee living on your property. Her name is Rosa, Robert said firmly, and she's not living there anymore. She left. Nevertheless, Harold continued, the board is concerned about the appearance of impropriety. We've worked hard to build this company's reputation. We can't have our CEO involved in scandals. It's not a scandal. Robert said, his voice rising. It's compassion. It's basic human decency. Perhaps, another board member interjected. But in this climate, with social media and constant scrutiny, we have to be careful. What if she makes accusations? What if she sues? Robert looked around the table at these men and women he'd worked with for years. They were worried about lawsuits and public relations. They couldn't see past their own fear to recognize a human being in need. Let me tell you something, Robert said slowly. 7 years ago, my wife died. She died giving birth to our son in a hospital surrounded by the best doctors money could buy. But she still died. And for months after that, I was barely functional. I came to these meetings. I signed the papers. But inside I was destroyed. He paused, making eye contact with each board member. Not one person in this room asked me if I was okay. Not one person checked on my kids. You all sent flowers and cards, but nobody actually cared. You were worried about the company, about stock prices, about keeping things running smoothly. And I get it. That's business. Robert stood up. But Rosa reminded me that we're not just business. We're people. And if helping a pregnant homeless woman makes you uncomfortable, if basic compassion threatens our reputation, then maybe this isn't a company worth protecting. The room fell silent. Harold cleared his throat. Robert, nobody's questioning your compassion. We just want to ensure this is handled appropriately. Appropriately? Robert laughed bitterly. She was sleeping in a closet in our building. Our building, Harold, where we walk past cleaning staff every day and never see them, never acknowledge them. What's appropriate about that? The meeting ended without resolution. Robert left feeling more determined than ever to find Rosa, regardless of what the board thought. That evening, his phone finally rang. Unknown number. Robert answered immediately. Mr. Wellington? A tired voice. This is Maria Santos. I work the night shift with Rosa. Do you know where she is? Robert asked urgently. I think so. She called me yesterday. She's at the Mercy House shelter on the east side. But Mr. Wellington, she didn't sound good. She said she was having pains. Robert's blood ran cold. What kind of pains? She didn't say exactly. But she's not due for another 3 weeks. I'm worried about her. Robert grabbed his car keys. What's the address? Mercy House was a converted church in a rough neighborhood. Robert had driven past it 100 times without really seeing it. Now standing in front of the chipped paint and worn steps, he felt ashamed of his blindness. Inside, the shelter was clean but crowded. Women and children filled every available space. Some slept on cots. Others sat on folded blankets on the floor. The air smelled of industrial cleaner and too many people in too small a space. A tired-looking woman at the front desk looked up when Robert entered. Her eyes widened slightly at his expensive suit, so out of place in this setting. I'm looking for Rosa Martinez, Robert said. I'm a friend. I heard she might be here. The woman hesitated. We don't usually give out information about our residents. Please, Robert said. She's pregnant. She's alone. I just want to help. Something in his voice must have convinced her. Room 12. Down the hall, last door on the right. Robert walked quickly down the narrow hallway. He knocked gently on the door marked 12. Come in, a weak voice called. Robert pushed open the door. The room was tiny, barely big enough for the 3 cots crammed inside. Rosa lay on the middle cot, her face pale and sweaty. Another woman sat beside her holding her hand. Robert? Rosa tried to sit up and winced in pain. You found me? Of course I found you, Robert said, kneeling beside her cot. Rosa, are you okay? Maria said you were having pains. Rosa's eyes filled with tears. I think something's wrong. The babies. They're coming too early. The other woman spoke up. She's been having contractions for the past hour. They're getting closer together. Robert didn't hesitate. We're going to the hospital. Right now. I can't afford... Rosa started. I don't care, Robert interrupted. We're going. Sophie and James are worried sick. I'm worried sick. Let's go. He helped Rosa stand, supporting her weight as another contraction hit. She gripped his arm, breathing hard through the pain. They made it to Robert's car, and he drove faster than he'd ever driven before, one hand on the wheel and one hand holding Rosa's as she squeezed through. Robert sat in the waiting room, his expensive suit wrinkled, his hair a mess from running his hands through it repeatedly. Sophie leaned against his shoulder, exhausted from crying. James paced back and forth, unable to sit still. It had been 2 hours since they'd wheeled Rosa into surgery. 2 hours of silence broken only by the ticking clock and the occasional page over the hospital intercom. 2 hours of Robert reliving his worst nightmare, remembering the night his wife died in an operating room just like this one. "What's taking so long?" James asked for the 10th time. "These things take time," Robert said, trying to sound calm, especially with twins, especially when they're premature. But his hands shook as he held his coffee cup. He couldn't lose Rosa. Not now. Not after everything. She'd come into his life like a storm, disrupting his comfortable numbness, forcing him to feel again, to care again, to be human again. Finally, a doctor emerged from the double doors. Robert jumped to his feet. "Mr. Wellington?" The doctor smiled, and Robert's knees nearly buckled with relief. "Congratulations. 2 healthy baby girls. They're small, only 4 pounds each, so they'll need to spend some time in the NICU. But they're breathing on their own and their vitals are strong. And Rosa?" Robert asked urgently. "She did great. She's in recovery now. You can see her in about 20 minutes. Sophie burst into tears of joy. James whooped and pumped his fist in the air. Robert just stood there, overwhelmed by the magnitude of relief washing over him. 20 minutes felt like 20 hours. When they finally let Robert into the recovery room, Rosa was awake but groggy. She looked pale and exhausted, but alive. "Beautifully, wonderfully alive. The babies?" she asked immediately, her voice hoarse. "Perfect," Robert said, taking her hand. 2 beautiful girls. The doctor says they're fighters, just like their mom." Rosa closed her eyes, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Can I see them?" "Soon," a nurse said kindly. "Let's get you settled in a room first, and then we'll bring you down to the NICU." An hour later, Robert stood beside Rosa's wheelchair as a nurse guided them to the neonatal intensive care unit. The NICU was a surreal place, filled with tiny babies in plastic incubators, monitors beeping, machines humming, nurses moving efficiently between stations. And there, in 2 incubators side by side, were Rosa's daughters. Tiny, red, wrinkled, and absolutely perfect. They had tubes and wires attached to them, monitoring their every breath, but they were alive. "Can I touch them?" Rosa whispered. The nurse smiled. "Of course. They need their mother's touch." Rosa reached into the first incubator, her hand trembling as she gently touched her daughter's tiny hand. The baby's fingers wrapped around Rosa's finger instinctively, and Rosa sobbed. "Hello, my love," Rosa whispered. "I'm your mama. I'm here. I'm never leaving you." Robert watched from a respectful distance, giving Rosa this moment with her daughters. But he felt it too. The overwhelming love, the fierce protectiveness, the absolute certainty that these tiny humans mattered more than anything else in the world. Over the next few days, a routine developed. Rosa stayed in the hospital, recovering from the delivery and spending every possible moment in the NICU with her daughters. Robert visited daily, bringing food, books, anything Rosa needed. Sophie and James came too, mesmerized by the tiny babies. "They're so small," Sophie breathed, looking through the NICU window. "I can't believe humans can be that small and survive." "They're fighters," Robert said. "Just like their mom." But while the babies grew stronger, complications arose outside the hospital walls. Richard hadn't been idle. He'd been building a case against Robert with the board of directors, painting him as reckless and irresponsible. One afternoon, as Robert sat in Rosa's hospital room discussing plans for when she'd be discharged, his phone rang. It was Harold from the board. "Robert, we need to talk. The board is calling for an emergency vote tomorrow. Richard is pushing for your removal as CEO." Robert's jaw tightened. "On what grounds?" "Conduct unbecoming of a company leader. Conflicts of interest. Poor judgment." "He's been very persuasive, Robert. Several board members are concerned." "Let them be concerned," Robert said coldly. "I'll be at the meeting." After hanging up, Robert saw Rosa watching him with worried eyes. "That was about me, wasn't it?" she asked quietly. "I've caused you so much trouble." "You haven't caused anything," Robert said firmly. "This is about power and control. Richard's been waiting for an opportunity like this for years. He wants to run the company himself. Maybe you should step back," Rosa suggested. "Focus on your kids, your business." "I'll be okay. The babies will be okay. We'll figure something out." Robert shook his head. "No, we're in this together now. Those board members need to understand that there's more to life than profit margins and shareholder value. Sometimes you have to do what's right regardless of the cost." That evening, Robert sat in his study preparing for the board meeting. Sophie found him there, papers spread across his desk. "Are you going to lose your company?" she asked bluntly. "Maybe," Robert admitted. "Richard's been very effective at turning the board against me." "Because you helped Rosa?" "Because I put people before profits. Because I showed vulnerability. Because I acted like a human being instead of a CEO. Sophie was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Mom would be proud of you." Robert looked up, surprised. Sophie rarely talked about her mother. "Mom always said you worked too much," Sophie continued. "She said you'd forgotten how to see people, really see them. But you saw Rosa. You saw her when nobody else did. And you helped her. That takes courage, Dad. Real courage, not the fake business kind." The next morning, Robert walked into the boardroom with his head held high. Richard sat at the far end of the table looking smug. The other board members wouldn't meet Robert's eyes. Harold called the meeting to order. "We're here to discuss Robert Wellington's future with this company. Richard has brought forth concerns about Robert's recent actions and their impact on company reputation and liability." Richard stood up, looking every bit the polished executive. "Ladies and gentlemen, I don't take pleasure in this. Robert built this company, but lately his judgment has been questionable at best, dangerous at worst. He personally moved a pregnant employee into his home, blurring professional boundaries in ways that expose us to massive liability." "Her name is Rosa," Robert interrupted, "and she was homeless and desperate." "That's not our responsibility," Richard shot back. "We have proper channels for charitable giving. We have HR policies." Robert ignored all of that to play savior, and now we're facing potential lawsuits, PR disasters, and accusations of favoritism. "What accusations?" Robert demanded. "From who?" Richard pulled out his phone. "Social media is already buzzing. Anonymous post claiming you're having an affair. Speculation that you're the father of her babies. Screenshots of you visiting her hospital room. This is a nightmare for our brand." Robert felt his anger rising but forced himself to stay calm. "Let me tell you what's actually a nightmare. A woman working for our company was so desperate that she slept in a closet. She was pregnant, alone, and terrified. And not one person in this company noticed or cared. That's the real scandal." "That's not our fault," another board member said. "We can't be responsible for every employee's personal situation." "Can't we?" Robert challenged. "We pay minimum wage to our cleaning staff. They work nights so we never have to see them. They make our building beautiful, and we treat them like they're invisible. Rosa worked for us for 2 years. 2 years of showing up early, doing excellent work, being a model employee. And when she needed help, where was this company?" Harold cleared his throat. "Robert, we understand your compassion, but Richard has a point about liability and reputation. Perhaps the solution is to step back from this situation. Let HR handle it appropriately." "Let HR handle it," Robert repeated slowly. "You mean throw some money at the problem and forget about it? Write a check and move on?" "If necessary, yes," Harold said. "That's how these things are handled." Robert stood up. "Then maybe I don't belong here anymore. Maybe this isn't the company I thought I built. I thought we were creating something meaningful, something that mattered. But if we can't show basic compassion to our own employees, if we care more about reputation than people, then we've lost our way." "So you're choosing her over the company?" Richard asked triumphantly. "You're willing to throw away everything you built for some cleaning lady?" The way Richard said cleaning lady made Robert's blood boil. So dismissive, so cruel. As if Rosa's job defined her worth as a human being. "I'm choosing to be a decent person," Robert said quietly. "Something you clearly don't understand. Rosa isn't just a cleaning lady. She's a fighter who put herself through nursing school while working multiple jobs. She survived losing her fiancé. She survived being homeless. She just gave birth to twins at 34 weeks, and they're all alive because she's strong and brave and incredible. And yes, I'm proud to help her. I'm proud to know her." The room was silent. Robert continued, his voice gaining strength. "You want to remove me as CEO? Fine, vote me out. But I'm not going to apologize for having a conscience. I'm not going to pretend that money and reputation matter more than human life. My wife died 7 years ago, and I spent those years hiding in this office, pretending I was fine, building an empire that meant nothing. Rosa reminded me what matters." 3 weeks later, Rosa stood in the NICU watching as nurses carefully removed the last monitors from Hope's tiny body. Grace had been discharged 2 days earlier and was waiting at home with a nurse Robert had hired. Now Hope was finally strong enough to leave the hospital too. "She's ready," the nurse said with a warm smile. "Your little fighter is going home." Rosa carefully lifted Hope from the incubator, marveling at how much weight she'd gained. 4 pounds at birth, now nearly 6, still so small but growing stronger every day. Robert waited in the hallway with Sophie and James. They'd visited the NICU every day for 3 weeks, watching the twins grow, bringing gifts and stuffed animals that the nurses said were too many, but appreciated anyway. "Ready to bring her home?" Robert asked. Rosa nodded, though her hands trembled slightly. "I'm terrified. What if I do something wrong? What if I can't handle both of them?" "You won't be alone," Sophie said firmly. "We're going to help. Dad hired that nurse, and James has been reading like 1,000 books about babies." It was true. James had become obsessed with infant care, filling notebooks with information about feeding schedules, sleep patterns, and developmental milestones. He'd even started talking about becoming a pediatrician instead of just a regular doctor. The drive home was careful and slow, Robert driving like he was transporting the most precious cargo in the world. Because he was. In the back seat, Rosa held Hope while Sophie sat beside her, ready to help if needed. When they arrived at the estate, the guest house had been transformed. Robert had hired people to install cribs, changing tables, a rocking chair, and everything else 2 newborns might need. The small house was filled with diapers, formula, baby clothes, and blankets. Rosa stood in the doorway, overwhelmed. "This is too much." "It's not enough," Robert said. "But it's a start." Grace was awake in her crib, and when Rosa brought Hope inside, it was the first time the twins had been together outside the hospital. Rosa placed Hope in the crib beside her sister, and the babies instinctively moved closer to each other, finding comfort in the presence they'd known since the womb. "They know each other," James whispered, fascinated. Over the following weeks, a new routine developed. Rosa focused on the babies, feeding them every 3 hours, changing diapers, learning their different cries and needs. The hired nurse, an older woman named Helen, helped during the night so Rosa could sleep. Sophie became obsessed with the twins, spending hours at the guest house, helping with feedings and diaper changes. She'd take pictures and videos, chronicling every tiny milestone. First smile, first time holding their heads up, first giggle. James approached fatherhood like a science project, tracking the baby's growth on spreadsheets, calculating their feeding amounts, monitoring their sleep patterns. It drove Rosa crazy sometimes, but she appreciated his enthusiasm, and Robert found himself transformed. He cut back his hours at work, delegating more to his management team. He came home for dinner every night. He was present in a way he hadn't been since his wife died. But the situation at work remained tense. Richard hadn't forgiven Robert for the board meeting. He'd backed off his attempts to remove Robert as CEO, but the coldness between them was palpable. At company events, people whispered. Some were supportive, admiring Robert's compassion. Others were judgmental, spreading rumors that refused to die. One evening, about 6 weeks after the twins came home, Robert received an unexpected visitor. Patricia from the board showed up at his office with a proposal. "I've been thinking about what you said," Patricia began, "about how our company failed Rosa, about how we treat our lowest paid employees like they're invisible. And I think you're right. We need to do better." She pulled out a folder. "I've drafted a proposal for a foundation, a program to help single parents who work for our company complete their education and advance their careers. Scholarships, childcare assistance, housing support when needed. Real help, not just empty gestures." Robert read through the proposal, impressed. "This is comprehensive, but it'll be expensive." "You're a billionaire," Patricia said bluntly. "You can afford it. And honestly, after what happened with Rosa, the company needs this. We need to show that we care about our employees as people, not just as labor." Robert thought about it. A foundation could help so many people like Rosa. Single parents working multiple jobs, struggling to survive, trying to build better lives for their children. People who just needed a chance. "There's one condition," Robert said. "I want Rosa to be involved. Once she finishes her nursing program, I want her to help run it. She knows what it's like to be on the other side. She'll make sure it actually helps people." Patricia smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." They presented the proposal to the board the following week. Richard objected, of course, calling it a waste of company resources. But Patricia had done her homework. showing how investing in employees increased loyalty, reduced turnover, and improved company reputation. The foundation was approved with a starting budget of $5 million. It would be called the Grace and Hope Foundation, named after Rosa's daughters. When Robert told Rosa about the foundation, she couldn't believe it. "You're doing all this because of me?" "I'm doing this because you opened my eyes," Robert corrected. "You showed me that our company had lost its way. This foundation will help people like you, people who are working hard but need a little support to succeed." Rosa was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Can I really help run it once I finish nursing school?" "I'm counting on it," Robert said. "You'll be the foundation's heart. You'll make sure it stays focused on what matters." Rosa's nursing program was set to resume in 2 months. She'd be able to attend classes while Helen watched the twins during the day. It would be exhausting, juggling school and motherhood, but Rosa was determined. "I want to show Grace and Hope that they can do anything," Rosa said. "I want them to grow up knowing their mother fought for them, worked for them, never gave up." As the weeks turned into months, life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Rosa excelled in her nursing classes, often studying late into the night after the babies were asleep. Sophie helped with babysitting, using it as an excuse to avoid her own homework. James continued his baby research, now fascinated by their developmental stages. And Robert found himself happier than he'd been in years. His relationship with his children had deepened. They talked more, laughed more, functioned as an actual family. Sophie had stopped being angry all the time. James had found a passion in medicine. They'd both learned that wealth meant nothing unless you used it to help others. One Sunday afternoon, 6 months after the twins were born, Robert organized a small gathering at his house. Rosa came with Grace and Hope, now chubby and healthy, their eyes bright with curiosity. Helen came too, having become like a grandmother to the twins. Patricia from the board attended, along with a few other close friends. They gathered in Robert's backyard, where he'd set up tables for a simple meal. It wasn't anything fancy, just burgers and salads, but it felt special, because everyone there genuinely cared about each other. Sophie took 1,000,000 pictures, documenting every moment. James showed off his latest baby growth charts to anyone who would listen. Rosa bounced Hope on her lap while Grace napped in her carrier, both babies wearing matching pink dresses that Sophie had picked out. "Speech," Sophie called out suddenly. "Dad, you should make a speech." Robert laughed, embarrassed. "I don't think—" "Come on," James urged. "Say something meaningful." Robert stood up reluctantly, looking around at the faces gathered in his yard. 6 months ago, he'd been alone except for his children. Now he had this makeshift family, connected not by blood but by love and circumstance. "I'm not good at speeches," Robert began. "I'm better with numbers and business plans. But I want to say something about how much has changed in the past year." He looked at Rosa. "A year ago, I was sleepwalking through life. I was successful on paper but empty inside. I'd forgotten how to see people, really see them. I'd forgotten what matters. Then one night I found Rosa crying in a bathroom, and everything changed. Not just for her, but for me, for my kids, for everyone in this yard." Robert's voice grew stronger. "Rosa didn't just accept help. She reminded me why helping matters. She showed me that compassion isn't weakness, it's strength. That wealth without humanity is worthless. That we're all connected, all responsible for each other." He looked at Grace and Hope sleeping peacefully in their carriers. These 2 beautiful girls exist because Rosa is a fighter, because she refused to give up even when everything seemed hopeless. And they're going to grow up knowing they were wanted, loved, fought for. That's Rosa's gift to them. "But Rosa also gave me a gift," Robert continued, his voice thick with emotion. "She gave me back my humanity. She made me a better father, a better person, a better man. She reminded me that my wife would be disappointed in the hollow life I was living, and that I owed it to her memory to do better." Sophie was crying now. James tried to hide it, but his eyes were wet too. "So thank you, Rosa," Robert said. "Thank you for letting me help you. Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for bringing grace and hope into this world. And thank you for reminding all of us what actually matters in life." Rosa stood up, carefully shifting Hope to one hip, and walked over to Robert. She hugged him tightly with her free